You'll notice there's one singular Avs picture in this intro. There's like 6 Nuggets ones. Welcome in to the DNVR Avalanche Podcast.
Getting used to that new intro.
Yeah, like, hey, look, I wish there were more Avs pictures in it, but it's still super cool. Like, that's all. When the Avs win their next Stanley Cup, we can put 3 more pictures in. It'll be fun. Rudo, Megan, AJ losing his mind in Canada. Talking middle six today, and this is one where we want to kind of get into some more of the numbers, start talking about contract value. And look, we talk a lot about how one of the scariest places that you can give contracts is that $3 to $5 million range. A lot of the time, those are contracts that players don't live up to, but sometimes those are contracts that end up being great value. So we're going to get through a lot of that. We're going to go through all of the Central Division as well as Tampa and Vegas, I believe. Take a look at the middle sixes out there in the league. And I don't know. The conversation about value will kind of happen. So where do you two want to start? Should we start with the Avs or should we start as far away from the Avs as possible?
I'm kind of curious before we actually start getting into the numbers. I know we've all looked at what got prepared. Thank you, Rudo. For the show today, but I'm curious, just in terms of perception, before we get into all the money stuff, where do we think Colorado's middle six would rank? Like, where would we put it in contrast with the teams that we're going to talk about today, which is mostly Central Division, and then a couple of others outside of that you cherry picked for, I think, obvious reasons?
I think in also having glanced at some of the others, it makes it difficult for me to give the most honest answer. But the whole point of this pod topic was because I believed the Avs have more value in their middle six than maybe was fully realized by the fan base, because I think there were a lot of mixed reactions to Ross Colton and Miles Wood, Ryan Johansson. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, I just wanted to see how it stacks up around the league, because I believed it would be a B grade middle six. And I think in a little bit of what I know, I think it's still going to be in the B range, but we could be looking at more like a B minus, and there are going to be some middle sixes in the Avs' biggest competition that are more A grade. And there's an appropriate then conversation about where the Avs make up for that with the rest of the lineup. So without getting ahead of myself too much, I'm putting them kind of in the mid-range, high mid-range though, with a B grade.
Okay. I think I certainly come down on that same general area. I would also like to say that just we'll get ahead of any of the potential arguments for this, but yes, you could put an Arturi Lehkonen or a Mikko Rantanen onto a second line.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't think any of the three of us would consider any of Arturi Lehkonen, Nathan MacKinnon, or Mikko Rantanen at this point a middle six guy. Correct. I think they have proven themselves. Two of those guys are the top 10 forwards in the NHL. And Arturi Lehkonen showed that while his production may not be top line, all the things that he brings to that top line makes him very valuable up there. And you can only have 3 guys there. So that's why those guys aren't really going to be counted in what we're talking about today. So certainly any alignment that they choose could have one of those guys on a second or a third line. But it's important to note that decisions had to get made in order to actually be able to do this exercise. So there could be a couple of guys that actually are like light first line type players that end up not being counted in this, because you've got to decide, like, your top line guys, you just have to pick at some point.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it, mechanically, every team will see their top 6 certainly rotate around to some extent.
Yeah.
But I'm not putting a guy who scored 105 points last year as a second line player for mechanical reasons. It's just not happening. So
Yeah,
you guys will probably
absolutely.
disagree with some of the lists that we made. I will say for Colorado, I do think it's a little bit hard to grade them right now because what are they actually going to get out of Jonathan Drouin? Does he play on the top line with McKinnon, or is he playing on a second line as a distributor there? Can Ross Colton take a jump in production that we haven't seen from him yet? There are enough question marks there for Colorado where any grade is, we'll wait and see what actually happens still, no matter what. So I do think it is a little bit hard to place Colorado given how much turnover they've had in their middle six.
I'm
Half of
only
it.
smiling a bit because of where we would have been with this conversation close to the start of last year, where the middle six would have included Galchenyuk and Newhook and Evan Rodriguez. And so I feel like having more clarity about the Avs middle six now, even though there are some holes, especially on that third line, is a better position to be in than I perhaps gave it credit for.
Maybe. I hope so. All right. Should we start? Should we do the one Eastern team first in Tampa Bay?
Yeah. And I think this is a really good place to start with the Lightning because it shows this is why it's really, really hard to stay at the top of the league.
Yeah. You have to continually find value in positions like this. And obviously Tampa has been doing this for as long as anyone, kind of trying to run back and fit pieces in and do all of those things. And you kind of see a list that's all over the place. The bell finally told, and them having to pay Anthony Cirelli on one hand, but on the other, they have one more year of Brandon Hagel at $1.5 million, who was a 60-point guy last year. I also don't know who that last guy is supposed to be. But
it's Mikey Asamont.
All right, there you go. Perfect. Either way.
Pretty sure Colorado Thunderbird, Mikey.
Oh, God, here we go.
I'm just kidding. I'm so sorry.
How much money?
Did you guys know he was born in Colorado?
When you look at a team like Tampa, where is their middle six at now? There was a time a couple years ago where I think their middle six was what everyone was chasing, what everyone wanted their middle six to be. Is it still in that realm, or has it fallen off a little bit?
Well, certainly in Brandon Hagel, they have one of the best value contracts in the NHL. You're paying $1.5 million for 64 points. That's Walt. Like, it's great value. They're not going to be able to keep him beyond this season. It's great value. And totally worth the couple first-round picks that they ended up trading for him. It ended up being a great move for them. The rest of that, Anthony Cirelli battled injuries, but has a lot of proving to do on the offensive end, but he is certainly one of the best defensive centers in the NHL. And I think when you go and you look at that list, I think what has to make Tampa Bay a little bit nervous is there isn't a lot of like what you're talking about with Colorado, where this guy's career has been derailed by injury. This guy's got this problem or that problem. There are like pockmarks all over there where you're saying, look, if they just stayed healthy, it's a pretty good lineup. Now, obviously, health is a factor, but with Tampa Bay, that group has not been particularly beat up.
Yeah.
And you look at the production, there's not a lot of guys that are playing in roles they haven't played in. There's not a lot of, well, we're hoping that this guy takes a step forward given more ice time. There's a whole lot of, this is just who this guy is. And I think that has to be the concern with that Tampa Bay group there, that their top line, when you have Kucherov, Point, and Stamkos, it's pretty unimpeachable. That's the goods. But immediately after, you do start to look at it and say, where are they going to get a lot of the offense from?
Tiff, would you be able to show Tampa's again? Interesting. It's something that I think Tampa has done well to remain competitive season by season, and that is find value in their middle six and their depth, generally speaking. But like AJ mentions, the production is where perhaps there's a little bit of lack. And in seeing that this is something they've invested in, to include Tanner Jeannot, a player that they took a really big swing on just to bolster their middle six specifically, I think that they are trying to stay competitive in a tough cap era, and it's a challenge that teams like Colorado are also facing, and why they're trying to find value wherever they can. But it does become difficult to see Hagel's 60 points there because it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, at least offensively. On the other side of the puck, this is a really tough to play against middle six, and I think that will continue to be true, especially just given the overall age of these players being on the younger side. I think the Lightning are still in a really great spot because of that, but they're straddling some of the same problems that Colorado is. Like, we're going to look at Colorado's and also wonder where some production is going to be coming from beyond the first line.
The part that I think is interesting about Tampa is their total cap hit investment there, which is a little over 16 million, is going to be one of the lower ones that we look at in this video. It really is on the low side as a whole, and it makes sense. Obviously, they have their top line, which they're invested in heavily, but they're also heavily invested in their defense with Sergachev and Hedman at the top of that, and then Vasilevsky on the back end. Every team has to choose where to spend their money a little bit, and Tampa is not spending a lot of it in their middle six, but are still finding ways to be productive enough. How long can they continue doing that? Like you mentioned, they need Tanner Jeannot to take some kind of step forward to find a little bit of production there. I don't know. And maybe they finally got one wrong with Jeannot. And it's things like that show how quickly the house of cards can come down for a middle six. Obviously last year the Avs had so many injuries. Their middle six was AHLers, but even if you lose one key guy in your middle six, all of a sudden the whole thing looks hugely different. If Brandon Hagel's not in Tampa's middle six, there's very little production to talk about there.
Yeah, I mean, can we just bring that up one more time real quick? Because you're talking Brandon Hagel is a third of the points.
Yep.
Comes from you. We're talking about 6 players here. 1/3 of them came from one guy. Connor Sheary did not do this in Tampa Bay.
Yep.
And that's kind of who, like, that scoring range is right around where he's been most of his career. That was a career year for Nick Paul. It was a down year for Tanner Jeannot, and then Miles Brandon Hagel is actually Mikey Eyssimont, and that's the first season that Mikey Eyssimont has been in the NHL, like for any meaningful length of time at all.
Yep.
So, it's, and then Anthony Cirelli's 29 points. Anthony Cirelli missed most of the season. I guess not most, but he missed a lot of it.
He missed like half.
But 20, yeah, and you're talking about there was one guy here in Brandon Hagel who in his career has scored more than 44 points.
Yep.
And when we talk about production from this group, it's important that we get a barometer of what expectations are, because we talk about 40-point players as like low end second line guys here and higher end third line guys.
Mm-hmm.
We're not even having that conversation with this group right now. It's Anthony Cirelli and Brandon Hagel. If they all stay healthy, those two guys should definitely hit 40 points. Tanner Jeannot's one good year in Nashville was driven by an insane shooting percentage, and as soon as he came down to earth, he was a completely ineffective NHL player. And again, so where's the upside here? Where's the cost efficiency? Assuming Anthony Cirelli is healthy, his two-way play should make him cost efficient enough at $6 million. But would you rather get 45 points and elite defense at your 2C spot for $6 million for that money, for the Cirelli money? Or would you rather pay pretty much the same thing for Val Nichushkin, who's also going to give you elite defense, albeit from a wing spot, and potentially score 65 points for you? And obviously Tampa Bay, they made the decision. They couldn't afford Ross Colton, so because they wanted to keep Cirelli. They said that we think he's going to be the guy. We think that he's going to have the big jump in production, even if he does, and Hagel repeats those 60 points. The rest of that is very low end in terms of scoring. And they aren't like Colorado, looking at a bunch of guys where you're saying, we could have bounce backs here. There's a lot of this is just who they are.
Yeah. Agreed. It will be interesting to see how it plays out, but we can move to the West now. I suppose we should bring up Vegas. at first, just to take a look at the Cup champs from last season. They aren't spending a ton either, but theirs is a little bit more interesting, and I think you will run into this a lot as we go through this video. ELCs continue to be king of value in the NHL. Pavel Dorofeyev at 800K, that 9 points is in like 23. It might even be like 17 games. The production value there is where Vegas is trying to find a lot of their middle six value, essentially. Obviously, they've been getting great stuff from Chandler Stevenson for a long time. And then you start talking about guys that maybe are more closely getting paid what they're worth, or perhaps even overpaid, and guys Barbashev and Carlson. And then you kind of end up on the fringes with these other guys. My question is, when you look at Vegas's middle six, this is a team that very popular, was touted as playing four lines, super tough against you as their run to the Cup final last season. Will they continue to be that? Are they going to continue to be wave after wave of guys, or do we think this middle six will take a step back?
I think Vegas is going to be a really good example of the strength of their roster because it's cost efficient. Obviously, a guy like Chandler Stevenson, like Brandon Hagel, a very, very good value deal there for that team, which they desperately need. But not even on that list is a guy like Nicolas Waugh,
Yep.
who was very good last year. They also have a guy like Will Carrier that's outplaying his contract on their fourth line as well. And that's for Vegas, it's really 1 through 12 that they do a really good job 1 through 12. And I think especially 4 through 12, because if you look at the highest paid guys on that with Marchessault, Stone, and Eichel, they're getting what they paid for. They're pretty comfortable with those guys as leading guys for them. But the rest of those guys, that Vegas group is just really solid. They've got a diversity of skill sets. They're good defensively. With Barbashev, Carlson, and Stevenson, you're talking about guys that have produced really good seasons on multiple occasions. They're not one-hit wonders. Those guys are pretty proven at this point. Michael Amadio is a guy they claimed off waivers and got a 27-point season out of. Dorofeyev is one of their, was a good prospect and a high enough-ish draft pick a handful of years ago. Brett Howden looks like he might have turned a corner a little bit. I know 13 points isn't like a thing that you get super excited about, but he was a really effective player for them last season. So I just think that's just a really, really solid, good two-way group that has a little bit of everything in it.
I think the points distribution is spread more equally throughout compared to like a Tampa. And this is something that Vegas has done well, is managing the needs of the team and balancing that. And I think it's something that keeps them competitive right now. They'll have some decisions to make with Stevenson and Marchessault next year, those being contracts that they can either extend, and that is going to come with an expense, especially with Stevenson, who they're getting great value from right now. Marchessault, of course, will be expensive, but this is where the conversation too about, like, would you prefer to have McKinnon, Rantanen, and whoever you want to put beside them alongside Vegas's top line? And you might probably favor Colorado in that conversation. But when you look at the whole of the picture, this is where I think Vegas has done something very well, and that is create balance and competitive lines 1 through 4 that I think they're, at least through this next season especially, going to do. And because they've demonstrated an aptitude in constructing their roster in this way, I don't doubt that this is the aim for them moving forward, is to find value wherever they can. And they'll probably continue to do it, even if it means making tough decisions.
And you both have brought it up, AJ with Tampa Bay and Hagel, you here in Vegas with Stevenson. By design, it is impossible to keep together a cost-effective middle six, because if you play well in the middle six on a cheap contract, that means when that contract runs out, you get paid. You become a top 6 caliber payment player. And
Good
that
offer.
value, while it may still be worth the contract, you're not going to get the same tier as getting 60 points for $1 million or 55 points or whatever Stevenson had for $2.5 million. So every single one of those players that is exceeding expectations is going to graduate out of that value middle six role. And it's how you keep your organization going and finding replacements for those guys and continuing to be effective in that area by finding someone else.
Like finding last year's Barbashev before
Exactly.
he got paid.
Yep.
I think looking for players that are looking to take a step forward but haven't quite done so yet, and being able to spot those types of players is something Colorado is literally looking to do right now in a Ross Colton.
Yep.
I also think that where Vegas is a little better set up than certainly Tampa Bay is that if Michael Amadio doesn't have a good year, if Brett Howden, doesn't have a very good year, there are guys that they trust. There is a Nicholas Waugh hanging around in that lineup. There is a Will Carrier. There is, Paul Cotter had like a decent impact last year. They're, call a good Colorado villain here in Keegan Colasar. Those are all guys that, like, if one of those guys falters in that Vegas lineup, there's another guy hanging around that can do that job that they have proven themselves in Vegas already. That was not true for Tampa Bay. It's definitely not true for Colorado.
Yeah. Agree 100% there. When it comes to Vegas, though, if you want to go see their value in action, make sure you do it with Circa Resort and Casino. You can get out to Vegas, stay with Circa. They have the world's largest sports book, ridiculous 78 million pixel screen, so you can really watch it on the big screen. Their casino has over 7,000 square feet with 2 levels, so there's a whole lot of table games and all sorts of ridiculousness going on in the casino. The resort itself has over 500 rooms. Of course, they have stadium swim. You can hang out by the pool and watch the action of whatever sport it is you want to catch. The whole place is super duper dope. So if you're heading out to Vegas, be sure to check out Circa. Plus, you pointed yourself. Yeah, on September 15th, the
collectively
kind of going to a rookie tournament thing. So
we better.
I mean,
I'll be there no matter what.
For tickets for $40 is the round trip flight. I mean, I'll just fly myself out there at that point. Like,
guys, we're
going.
We aren't. There's no conversation. We are going to Vegas for this.
I'll go if you guys.
We are going to be there. Whatever happens, we are going to be there. So come say hi to us because we're going to be in Vegas in a couple weeks. I guess it's about a month.
The best part is when you stay with Circa and you use the correct code that I definitely have and know off the top of my head and am not having to look up right now. Oh, it's just code DNVR. I should have known. When you use code DNVR when you're reserving a room, you get 20% off your stay. Vegas is already ridiculously cheap. You throw on another 20% and you're bordering on going to Vegas for free at that point. I'm just saying. It's worth the money.
Is this girl math?
Is definitely some questionable math. Might be some Vegas math.
Vegas math.
But still a great place to go stay. Use the DNVR code to get that 20% off. Whether it's for the rookie tournament coming up or you're seeing Avs versus Knights, maybe you're going out there for a Broncos-Raiders game, whatever it might be. Circa Sports is the place to stay. All right. Right. Also brought to you by Illegal Pete. Sorry, I was just ready to move on. I need some Illegal Pete's. I'm running on fumes here. I did not eat breakfast today, maybe I'll swing by after the show. Fantastic burritos with all sorts of delicious fresh ingredients. Their queso, absolutely amazing. And they do happy hour from 3 to 8 p.m. So it's the longest happy hour in town. I'll tell you what, it's sunny out this week. It's nice and toasty as well. So a great time to go enjoy the patio at Illegal Pete's if you haven't been out there. 11 different locations here in Colorado to check out. So there's one near you somewhere, including one just a couple blocks from the DNVR bar. Actually, it might be a good place to go to lunch before you come visit us on Friday for our live show. 6 p.m. here at the DNVR bar. Megan and I will be talking hockey. You can watch and listen to the show live in the bar, and then I'll be hanging out. We can vibe and talk hockey with all y'all that are here after the show. So it should be a fun time on Friday. Come down, say hello to us, and enjoy your illegal Pete's before you do that. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. Did we want anything more to say about Vegas, or are we good? Good. All right.
The less we have to talk about Vegas.
Let's move into the Central Division. Let's start at the bottom with Chicago, because this one's going to be a little bit weird and not super representative. One, because they're only spending $12 million. They're throwing a bunch of kids and random guys at their middle six, and this conveniently calls Corey Perry a fourth line player.
And Nick Foligno.
Yeah, Foligno as well, a fourth line player. So, the money's a little bit misleading. And the reality for expectations out of this middle six is not a lot. I think they'd probably like to make way for Reichel and Radish to be as successful as possible. And the rest of these guys are kind of just dudes. But maybe I'm wrong.
You're talking about the top three guys on that list, Blackwell, Dickinson, and Donato, would all be fourth liners on a good team.
Yeah.
And have been fourth liners on a good team in their careers. Like, that's what Chicago is paying for, as well as giving $8 million for a piece to Foligno and Corey Perry.
Yep.
Like, not on that list, Andreas Athanasiou and Phil Kurashev. You could also throw in there. Those guys are somewhere in that mix as well. And it's like, okay, great. We added all these guys potentially to that list. I think the fact that you can name all those guys as potential middle six guys goes to show you this is a mess.
Yeah, well, to reinforce that problem, for the purposes of doing this list, Athanasiou is a top line player in Chicago.
Yeah, I don't know if he still is with Taylor Hall and Connor Bedard both showing up, and
but money mechanically,
imagine that they will try to get one of the other kids up there with those guys, but especially Reichel. But yeah,
my assumption is Reichel will end up there, but money-wise, he is the guy getting paid and expected to produce.
Yeah, and Tyler Johnson, for the record, is making $5 million. So they are spending $5 million on Tyler Johnson, $4 million on Corey Perry, and $4 million on Nick Foligno. Those guys will all factor into their forward group. They're all bad now, and that's a lot of money. Team trying to get to the cap floor, right? Like, Who cares? And then those other guys that I mentioned, that would be Blackwell, Donato, and Dickinson. Those are all guys that they should be trying to find homes for come deadline, especially Blackwell and Dickinson, who are on expiring deals.
It's not pretty.
What?
Yeah, they're terrible.
What is the points output that you could be hopeful for? And maybe instead of breaking it into the entire middle six, second line by third line, like what would be the ideal points production for the second line and then the third line?
So your second line, realistically, I think if you have a good second line, you should be probably looking for around 150 points out of. You really want a 60-point guy, at least one on your second line, probably your center in most cases. Avs are a little bit different, as that's kind of Nichushkin's role. Yeah, not going to get into that because that's a really complicated conversation, but a 60-point guy and two 40-point guys gets you to 140 points on your second line. I think that's a pretty reasonable ask for a good hockey team to have as a second line. The third line, it gets a little bit more complicated. If you have a more defense-oriented shutdown third line, maybe you're okay with a line that gives you 90 to 100 points. If you have a third line that wants to produce, wants to provide more offense, you're probably looking at something closer to 120. But
yeah,
it just kind of depends on how that line is structured more than with a second line.
I think it's a good, because in the same way that Moneyball made famous the idea of you're not trying to buy players, you're trying to buy runs.
Yeah,
Hockey teams are trying to buy goals. They're trying to buy production. And when you have a high scoring defense like Colorado's, maybe your third line can be more like an 80-point third line.
Yep.
But I would say, to answer Megan's question, I would come pretty close to agreeing with those baselines of expectation. I think 150 points for your second line is really fair. That's 50 points per player. You
Yep.
might get a little higher, a little lower, depending on variance and skill level, but that's a fair ask for like a solid second line. It's not an amazing second line, but it's a solid one. It's one that, especially when you have Colorado's high end talent, you're very comfortable with. And for the third line, I would probably say about 105, 35 points each.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more, and you have a guy that could maybe be on a second line, a little less, and maybe that guy's getting overplayed a little bit. So I would say 35 each should be the goal, and then a first line is like however many you can get, big dogs, and a fourth line is please just don't have that number be under 50.
Yeah. If you get 20 points a guy out of your fourth line, that's 60 points, and you can live with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing some mental math here. No, it's just because this is a really difficult expectation for any team to live up to, genuinely.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not an unfair expectation, but even looking at other teams who are the Avs' biggest competition, I don't know that anyone is constructed to quite live up to that. So I'm just going.
I think there are one or two teams on here that last year had over 250 points from their middle six, but there are not a ton.
Interesting. Yeah, just like even looking at JT Compher's career high year with second line opportunity, he barely makes that cutoff.
And that's why he's not a second liner.
Well, and that it's an honest conversation then to have. Just it's not even the position that solely the Colorado Avalanche are in, but
no, not at all.
It's where Nichushkin has hovered in playing some of his best hockey.
Yep.
It's really interesting though, because I don't think we would ever doubt that Val Nichushkin is a second line player now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's just an interesting thing to keep in the back of the mind that there's a lot of fluctuation in what different parts of the lineup should be living up to compared to what other things they bring to the table and where they're making up for some of that loss of production, like with Colorado specifically, a lot of it coming from their defensemen.
Yep. There is always a lot of context there, of course. Someone might be on a 60-point pace, but they get injured.
And the reason Chicago made me think of this is that was a lot of players that I think could easily have 30-point seasons next year.
Yeah.
All of them. And I was like, that seems a little weird, though, because I'm looking at Colorado's third line, and I'm not sure all of them are 30-point guys, though I'd like for them to be. And this is in years past, like the last couple seasons, that I don't know that I'd look at Colorado's third line and say, oh, yeah, they're each 30-point guys easily. So that's just what made me think of it with Chicago specifically, is they're getting kind of consistent production, but it is third, fourth line caliber production, but their second line is also included in that mix.
When you have 9 third liners, it becomes a problem.
Exactly. Yeah. There we are.
Well, it becomes kind of a feedback loop as well, because it's not just that those guys, the Dickinson, Donato, Blackwell, it's not just that those guys are like, yeah, they're fine NHLers or whatever. They could give you 25 to 30 points, but can they do it together? How much of their production has been helped out because they got to play next to somebody?
Yeah.
That they were the fourth line guy who got moved up to a good third line or a second line for a little while, and that goosed that production a little bit. We all know what happened with JT Compher last year. Without Mikko Rantanen, he doesn't have the season that he does. There's a reason that it's a massive outlier in his career, and it was because his opportunity was different. It's one reason why I think people need to be really careful about trying to assess what's about to happen with one of the teams we're going to talk about here in Arizona, where some of those guys are going to get opportunity in the lineup that they would not get on a better team. And you look at some of the numbers and say, whoa, okay. It's one thing when a guy produces big numbers when he's playing 18 minutes a night and he's averaged 14 in his entire career, and then he has a career season because he played 4 extra minutes every single night. Like, there's some added context there, but in the Chicago conversation, these guys at the bottom of it are at the bottom of good NHL rosters. Can they do it together? Will their skill sets be able to mesh? Because you're talking about at that point really limited NHL players. Ryan Donato has always been a good goal scorer for a depth guy, but he doesn't do much else. So can Blackwell and Dickinson help him
Shore
with
that
some
up
of
a
those
bit,
other
yeah.
aspects of the game? Not even just those guys, obviously. You throw in Kurashev and Johnson and Foligno and Perry, and oh my God, is that lineup bad? It's fine to have a couple of those guys, but that to be 3/4 of your lineup is a horror show.
I think it's pretty clear Chicago is not really trying to be good with this part of their lineup, and that's just where they are as an organization. Yes, Bedard has sped up this process for them, but they're really still a year away from starting to build a lineup that they are fully happy with. Now, Reichel, Radish, there are pieces in there that they want to see succeed this year. But when you compare that to Arizona, as AJ mentioned, and we can bring up their list, Arizona is starting to transition into a team that's trying to build a forward core that is solid top to bottom. And you end up in this place where they're spending significantly more money on their middle six than Chicago, but they still have the potential to find value in someone like a Logan Cooley, who they did get signed, to Dylan Genther as did he play enough games? He still qualifies for the Calder, right? I think so. And then these other pieces in Alex Kerfoot, in a Jason Zucker, and some guys that have been around the league that certainly in Kerfoot's case, you're trying to find some value there. In Zucker's case, you're somewhere in between where you don't know if he'll necessarily live up to that contract, but that's a guy you can also flip. Where are you at with Coyotes? Have they done a successful job of building the team they want to be this year, AJ?
This list makes me laugh because it's you're gonna have to replace one of them because they don't have a second center on here.
Sure. I mean,
like Nick Bukestad, you could probably drop in there and we'll replace one of these guys, right? But it doesn't materially change the conversation. This is looking at this group, you're like, this is a group with a lot of upside. Michelli, Cooley, Genther are guys that you all expect to continue to get better as the season goes on and will be good players in the future. Kerfoot, Krause, and Zucker are proven NHL players. They're fine. They're solid. Kerfoot never really quite recaptured that rookie season magic he had in Colorado.
Yep.
But again, when you shoot 19% or whatever it was, it's hard to do a lot. But I like this group. I think this is a competitive group, and it's a group that for the team that they are, we've talked about it before. Jason Zucker probably is a deadline guy. The rest of these guys, though, will be there for at least 2 years, and with Cooley, Krause, Michelli, and Genther, those are building blocks. Those are guys that they would like to have be in the roles that they're going to be in for the foreseeable future, with the exception of Cooley, who they hope becomes a 1C and gets replaced by Barrett Hayton in that lineup. Yep. So going into it, I think they have one of the lower scoring groups for right now, but man, that's a group that I'm thinking look out for. Also, I strongly doubt this happens. With Schmaltz being the center. Schmaltz has been a wing for the majority of his time.
Play center.
Yeah, Schmaltz has been a center or a wing for the majority of his time in Arizona, and he and Keller have made magic together. It's like breaking up Lehkonen and McKinnon. Just don't do
it. If Cooley's good enough to play on the top line, they'll just swap him and Hayton. I don't think that conversation's that complicated. I am curious,
absolutely.
Though, Megan, obviously, AJ and I are big prospect guys. You follow the Eagles a lot. Regularly in our circles, we hear people call for the youth movement, for getting all these young kids in there, as Arizona is kind of doing. Is it too much? At what point are too many young kids in the lineup a problem? Or do you think this is good? Do you think all of these kids will have a chance to succeed in Arizona?
Well, it's a good mix of young and old. I think that not to call Kerfoot old necessarily, but I'm grouping young. Kerfoot with the Zucker types of players. And I think that they have a good blend then of that type of player alongside a young but not completely young kind of player in Keller.
Sure.
And then someone like McBain, who has now some pro experience under his belt and is building towards more. They have a lot of young depth on wing that makes it a really promising forward group, even if Logan Cooley has some struggles in his first pro year.
Yep.
Even if that's to happen, there is still young experience that is Michelli too, now going back for his second year pro, that I don't think is going about this in the wrong way. They're not being thrusted with too much responsibility without viable backup options to help take that place if Cooley does need to play maybe more limited minutes at certain points or work on a couple of the intangibles. I think it's really well constructed. It's a promising looking group.
I think Megan's point that it's a healthy mix is a really, really good one, because when you look at the average age of that forward core, it's about 25 years old. Compare that to Chicago's, two rebuilding teams. Even with 18-year-old baby boy Connor Bedard in there, it is 27 years old at the average age of their forward group.
Yeah.
Where they have skewed much older and to be honest, much more ineffective. And when you look at what Arizona has, I love Megan's point here of it is a great mixture of a blend of youth and roles, as well as the veteran experience. But they've avoided the trap of getting washed guys just for the sake of having the veteran presence, and he gets to teach me how to be a pro. Like they've got guys that can do that in Bukestad, but who are also good players still, who also have jobs that they can fill. And I like Jack McBain, so I'm glad that you brought him up, because I tend to forget that he exists.
The one other question I have, if you can bring back up the Arizona lineup, do they have enough play drivers in this middle six? Now, obviously, a decent amount of that is going to be shouldered by how much can Logan Cooley do it in the NHL in his first year. But I look at some of these guys. Matias Michelli, look, great hockey player, but he's going to be more of a perimeter guy, going to be more of a distributor. You have someone like Dylan Genther, who should project as a goal scorer in the NHL, but how much of that is actually on the puck play compared to finding soft spots in the ice? I think Krause has stepped into that role a little bit. You know what you're getting out of a Jason Zucker. I do worry a little bit about who the motor is, though, at times with this middle six.
It's really, they're going to live and die with Cooley, I think, in terms of driving play and not just being really opportunistic as they were last year. If they're going to take a step forward and start to really balance out possession, it's got to be because Logan Cooley is the truth.
Fair enough. All right. Well, this show's going to go long today, folks.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we blast through a couple of these really quickly, because there isn't a lot to say?
Yeah. Do you want to blast through the middle ones? I just bring up one of the Central Division teams. I like Nashville or somebody.
Yeah. Oh, so forgettable. This group is awful.
It's not good. They're spending $8 million.
A lot of youth here, and trying to get it better. You know, Novak, Evangelista, Glass, and Tomasino are all guys that you could say, oh, these guys could get better. I guess Parsonen too.
I don't know how much more Glass has in the tank, because he's kind of already established at this point. But Novak and Tomasino for sure.
Yeah.
The rest of it is just kind of, feels, exactly. Odds and ends pieces.
Even if you throw Dennis Gurionov and Yakov Trenin somewhere into this mixture, it doesn't make it better.
Yep. Megan, you talked about Chicago having 9 third-line players. Nashville, another great example of not a ton of guys with the high end or higher ceiling, I guess I should say, in that lineup.
Well, and it's tough knowing the state of things with Nashville without going on too much of a tangent. We've talked about some of our least favorite offseason moves, and that meant shipping off some of what was on the top of their lineup.
Yep.
And I get it. They get Ryan O'Reilly in the return of all of this, but it still feels like there's now quite a bit missing from their forward group on the whole.
And certainly Johansson and Duchesne were overpaid in Nashville at $8 million apiece, but they just haven't replaced their production.
No, because I feel like Ryan O'Reilly's a neutralizing addition that helps to make up for some of that loss, but does not. What's the word? Like, it's not more than.
Unless he's about to have a 100-point season, which I don't think is about to happen.
Do you think Phil Forsberg is pissed that he re-signed there? Like, he, of course, every player will, like, I just want to play in one place for my whole career. He's very well established there. It's big fish, small pond kind of thing. But do you think he's like looking around like a year after he signed over the rest of his career, like,
what is this?
This sucks, man. I thought there might be a transition period, but they're like who's helping? Who's on the way? Like,
Yeah.
Philip Tomasino was a guy that I absolutely loved in his draft year. And even then, it was like, maybe he's a second line player if he maxes out. Where's the guy going to come from? Who's the guy that they are going to try to build around in that forward core? Because they have solid prospects, but their best prospect is a goaltender, which is their strongest position already. Everything Nashville related right now, its existence pisses me off because I can't figure out the vision.
Let's do Minnesota really quickly here as well. Minnesota, obviously in a spot where they have a lot more cap restrictions than most teams, given their buyouts.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of dudes at the bottom of their third line is just guys. Like, I really don't know what to tell you. You have the Folignos, Duhaimes, and Gaudreaus of the world. They're never going to wow you. They're going to go out there and do what they do. You have Hartman, who is far less interesting when he's not getting hard carried by Kaprizov. And then you have, like, how long can Mojo keep doing this? And Zuccarello, who's a solid piece.
Yeah, the thing with Zuccarello, though, and it's very applicable to the Dallas conversation that we'll have to have quickly, but Zuccarello's getting old, and you got to wonder, when does the magic start to slip there, especially for a smaller guy. If the hands go even a little bit, his effectiveness goes with it. And you do look at it, Foligno, Johansson, Zuccarello, these are older guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no real youth here. And like Brandon Duhaime, like 10 points here. Like, this is where they are begging to be saved by Marco Rossi.
Yep.
Because your 10-point Brandon Duhaime at 26 years old. Ryan Hartman's even 28. So I think he's even going to be 29 by the start of the season. So you're talking like this is a fine lineup. This is a fine lineup. This is competitive. This isn't going to win you playoff rounds, even though you have to like that scoring that they got out of it last year. 219 points is rock solid production. Repeating it, I think, is going to be a big ask.
Agree. On that note, we are brought to you by Bacchus and Shanker. So if you've been run over by a middle six, call 222-2222 today. Also, if you've been in like a real injury situation, car accident, even if it was like a rideshare thing, or if you got hit by one of the scooters downtown, you got injured at work and it wasn't your fault, that's where Bacchus and Shanker comes in. If you call the 2 number, go to coloradolaw.net today. They will give you a free consultation no matter what. If they think you have a case, they will take your case on, and you will pay nothing until you win your case. So it costs you nothing to try and get what you deserve with these guys. Go check them out if you haven't. Again, they're really, really good at what they do. They've been doing this forever in Colorado, and they've won over $1 billion for their clients over the 25 years that they've been doing it. So they'll get you what you deserve at Bacchus and Shanker. Get your free consultation with the 2 number today. Also brought to you by the folks over at Shady Rays. Get yours today with code DNVR when you purchase. And if you get 2 pairs of sunglasses or more, you get 50% off your entire order. They've got all sorts of amazing styles, something to make everybody look cool. And they've been rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people. So you know that they are a good product. And the best part is their 30-day guarantee. Whether you lose them, you break them, or you just don't like them, if it's in the first 30 days, send them back and they will replace them at no cost to you. So go check them out. Shady Rays, pretty cool. And AJ doing some thinking over there.
I just saw the John Farinacci news.
Yeah, signed by Boston.
Yeah, I want to know if at the end we could talk about Steinberg for a second.
Yeah, definitely. We Nuggets are going in Studio B, so we're chilling. We can do whatever we want.
No parents, no rules.
Yeah.
Some rules.
You
One
can't make
rule.
me. You can't
Yo,
make me.
this is my last pod till I'm back in Denver, so I'm actually like, yeah, let's go long. Let's just
Hey.
keep talking hockey. I'm gonna be jonesing to talk Avalanche this
You're
time
about
next
to
week.
spend 5 days not talking
Oh,
about this.
no.
I know.
Okay. Who's next on the list? We got Winnipeg, I guess, would be our next victim.
All right, dramatic.
This is please Cole Perfetti help us. Please Gabe Vilardi take the next step team, right? Like,
Yeah, so this is a really big topic of conversation in Winnipeg is what does this alignment look like? Because you could easily have Cole Perfetti on that top line replacing Blake Wheeler playing next to Scheifele and
Yep.
Kyle Connor, and Vlad Nemesnikov would slide into that spot.
Yep.
Does that move the needle for either one of you? Vlad Nemesnikov at this point in his career?
No.
It's kind of my point. This is another group that I think is solid. On an individual basis, you could look at guys like Iafallo, Niederreiter, and Velarde, and say these guys could really help a team like Colorado. Like those would be really good complementary pieces. Is their high end still high enough for this to be what they need? I think is my overriding question here. Because you look at the scoring here, outside of Mason Appleton, this is very balanced. Everybody between 30 and 41 points. And again, if you swap out Perfetti for Nemesnikov, that's even more true because Perfetti's about to have a 50-point year. And Nemesnikov's probably about to have a 30-point year. So the balance here I think is really good. The styles is really good. I really like this group. It's just Mason Appleton, Adam Lowry, The rest of these guys I do really like, and I think there's plenty of upside with a Gabe Vilardi, and even an Iafallo and Niederreiter.
I mean, I think the other win here is you have no landmines, right? None of these contracts you're looking at and going, boy, there's no way that guy's living up to that. A la Tyler Johnson in Chicago.
Yeah, I think Iafallo at $4 million made a lot of sense when it got signed, and then when you look at it right now, it's probably like maybe 500K
Over, sure.
more than it should be, but even then, he had 36 points in like 60 games last year. So I'm probably not even being fair there. So I think it is a fair point though that the value here there isn't like a outside of Perfetti and his ELC, but again he's gonna be a top line guy. That there isn't a major obvious like great value, but there isn't anyone that you're looking at going, oh my god.
Well, and like we discussed with the Avs and Lehkonen, if Ehlers, health permitting, is someone that flexes between a second line role and a top line role, he's boosting the value of the middle six with his presence there.
Yeah.
And I think that just improves then how the middle six stacks up, because there's probably some of those players that are interchangeable, different parts of the lineup, which also make a fourth line better if any of those players have to slide down.
Yep.
And that is why I think this is one of the best that we've looked at. Like, I even didn't think Minnesota was half bad. I'm giving them a B grade too.
Sure.
But I would say Jets are in the maybe A- category to B+.
A little more upside with the Jets middle six.
Easy
I would say.
for me to feel that way at least.
Certainly, if they do add in Ehlers, honestly, if he's healthy and he's on the top line and that pushes Perfetti into that group, and you replace Appleton with Rasmus Kupari, the other guy that came over in the Kings deal, I think that you can really bang on the upside drum there with a lot of youth, but enough proven skill as well between Niederreiter, Nemestikov, Lowry, those guys. That it is a really healthy mix, and I think I agree with Megan. I think this is the best group that we've looked at so far, just the most balanced.
So, then the question is, does Dallas keep up? Are they also a strong middle six? And This one is expensive, folks. They're paying their middle six a lot of dollars. To be fair, there's a lot of production there, too. I could have made them pay their middle six even more money. You could easily swap Joe Pavelski and Jamie Benn if you want to do that. I had to make decisions. Their production was similar, and Jamie Benn costs a whole lot more, so I threw him on the top line.
Jamie Benn had one more point than Joe Pavelski did last year.
Yep.
So you're really splitting a hair there. The big difference there is Jamie Benn makes $9.5 million, and Joe Pavelski is going to get paid $3.5 million this year.
Yeah. So expectations are a little bit more necessary out of Ben to be a top line caliber player. We'll leave it that way. But we haven't really seen a middle six on this list yet with this much high-end ability, even if it is an aging Joe Pavelski, even if it is an inconsistent Tyler Seguin and Matt Duchene. Is this enough? Have they justified the amount of money they're paying their middle six?
It's interesting because this is a middle six of extremes,
Sure.
especially if you swap Pavelski with Ben. Even if he scores 78 points again for Jamie Benn, he's cost inefficient at $9.5 million.
Yep.
So you're not getting a value there. You're not getting you're not even close to getting value with Tyler Seguin. And to be honest with you, the season that Mason Marchment had was a pretty big disappointment for them, given that they paid him $4.5 million.
Yep.
Making the same exact money as Arturi Lehkonen, and Lehkonen had 20 more points for comparison. So you're talking about bad value in a lot of this, but then Matt Duchene at $3 million dotted our, the guy was all over our conversation earlier this week about best offseason move.
Yep.
And Wyatt Johnston, ELC 20-goal season last year for a guy that barely got power play time. And then Joe Pavelski continuing to give them sweetheart deals at $3.5 million. You're talking about that's where they're making it up. It's extremely productive. It is also very expensive, but their extremes balance each other out. All of their losses are countered by wins, and that's how they have to be successful. If you're going to have a bad value contract, you need a great value contract to help it out.
Yep.
They have that balance, and for me, when you also factor in that Rupe Hintz, Jason Robertson are also great value. This is the best built forward core in the Central Division.
They just can't keep getting away with this. How are they getting all of these players to agree to such friendly contracts, from Robertson to Duchene? And I get each one has explanations as to why. Like Duchene, it's just for the foreseeable future for a reason. But that's the best explanation for it, is they are good negotiators and got tremendous value from some excellent players in there that really makes it competitive. And they're paying for it in ways too, though. You look at the overall cost that's being spent there, it's significantly more than the Avalanche are paying in theirs too.
$55 million on their entire forward core, I'm pretty sure it is.
Well, yes, that's why I was looking at the breakdown on defense and forwards, how much they're paying, and it's something like 66% is tied up in the forward group.
Yeah.
And that is not quite the same split for the Avs, because I was very curious. It's comparable. I'm sure it's comparable for most teams, but it is definitely one distinction, is that they are spending quite a bit more money on their forwards.
Yep.
It's also notable the Avs now have the highest paid player in the league, and they are spending $8 million less than Dallas on their forward core. And that's even with sweetheart deals from Robertson and Pavelski. And then obviously an ELC in Wyatt Johnston. But that, I mean, it's a great point from Megan that's so expensive. That's a lot of money on your forward core, but they're getting what they need out of it.
Throw A+ completely,
sure,
but it is one of the best and most competitive. They are just paying for it as well.
It turns out sometimes good lineups are expensive, but when you talk about a lineup that is expensive like that, there's no room for lack of success. It has to produce night in and night out. Their entire forward core has to be what's winning them hockey games. Not to take Heiskanen and Lindell are good players, and I don't want to take away from their defense at all, but it's not like Colorado where their defense can just go out and win them a hockey game by themselves. it's going to be on that forward core to carry that team.
Well, and looking at the goaltending situation, I still am a believer in Onger.
For sure.
But they also have good value in their goalies, the amount of money that they're spending, and they have that value for Onger through 2 more seasons. So them spending this money on the forwards makes sense because they're in this competitive window. They have a great goaltender locked up for a few more seasons now. They can put that money there. They can justify it.
Yep.
Megan, I'm curious. This isn't really related to our conversation, but I am curious. Would you rather spend $5 million, as Dallas is doing, on Jake Ottinger and Scott Wedgwood, or would you rather spend $5.4 million on Alexander Georgiev and Pavel Francouz
Georgiev and Francouz.
for the next 2 seasons? Because Francouz and Wedgwood are both free agents, but the starters are both locked up at their current deals for the next 2 years.
Yep.
So not looking at the next 10 years, just in the next 2 years. Which you would prefer Colorado's?
I would, for the experience standpoint. With Georgiev, I think that he mentally handles the pressure a little bit better, and I say that cautiously. Ottinger's just such a young goaltender. That is where I think Georgiev has a slight edge. And then with what we know Francouz can bring to the table, he could sweep a Western Conference final in a pinch, and that is the kind of reliability that I would want in a goaltender. It's close to being a starter himself in Francouz, and that is hard to come by.
Yep.
I think I would also take Colorado's. Certainly for the next 2 years. If that's more like 7 years, I would probably prefer Ottinger. But for right now, I mean, Georgiev was just so unflappable last year.
Well, just the volatility of young goaltenders, you just never know.
Yeah.
It's hard to even someone.
Well,
like
we saw it.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's
compare the
fabulous.
conversation of how we talk about Jake Ottinger today versus the way that we did a year ago
Yep.
when he was coming off of the historic playoff series against Calgary that they lost. We were talking about him. Oh my God, Jake Ottinger. What if that continues? This guy's amazing. And then he had like a solid year.
He's still pretty good.
But he
believe
didn't have
it,
the
yeah.
kind of like he didn't unhinge his jaw and swallow the hockey world whole like some people talked about happening.
Yep.
You know, it was like a solid season, but because he already had that name ID, people will be like, oh, but Jake Ottinger. But was his year better than Alexander Georgiev's? I don't know that it was. I think they were
Yeah.
pretty similar seasons.
Yep. Agree.
And I think Georgiev was certainly the better postseason goaltender.
The most forgettable team in the division, I forgot to do them earlier, in St. Louis.
Great. We looked at it. We can move on.
It exists. I mean, cool. Is Kevin Hayes really the solution to losing Ryan O'Reilly? I don't know, man. Like, I forget which other team I said this for, but this middle six really is Braden Shen and a bunch of dudes. Yes, like the Wild.
Yeah, this is Jake Neighbors needs to do something and take the Oscar Sundqvist job. Like the rest of these guys, these are all like good players, right? Like I don't want to say that for Kasperi Kapanen. I actually think he sucks. And Verona could be good. He's had so many problems, but when he's been healthy, he's been a really effective goal scorer. Just how good is the red? Like Braden Shen is solid, Brandon Saad is solid, Kevin Hayes is solid. I think this is a fine group, but as we're looking at, it's a fine group, but also an expensive one. And when you're a team that has a bad defense, you need to make up for that somewhere. Dallas is spending a lot of money on that group that we looked at, but they got a ton out of it. St. Louis is spending a pretty penny on this group, and they're getting fine production. But they don't really have good value anywhere else on their roster. Their most expensive players were both letdowns last year in Kyrou and Thomas. Pavel Buchnevich is a very valuable guy on a good contract, but he can't stay healthy. There isn't one single guy in their defense right now that you would say is actually good value. And their goaltending, they spent $6 million on Jordan Binnington to make a fool of himself all year. So you this is the heart of the roster. This is the meat and potatoes of it, and it's maybe the best value that they're getting right now. And it's just okay. It's just okay. There's a reason this team has put themselves into a totally forgettable place.
Yep.
I had St. Louis as one of my least favorite teams of the offseason because of their inability to do very much. And I recognize that Kevin Hayes is a new addition to the group moving forward, but this is a player that affects the middle six. Like, that just doesn't really move the needle for me in how I view St. Louis and how they stack up against their competition. And I also share AJ's opinion. I don't think Kapanen is a $3 million player, and I think that's just a lot of money, generally speaking, to invest in your middle six for what you're getting.
Especially
Where's the value there?
Especially when you're lacking upside.
I liked Vrana, though. I do think that's a gamble on a player that could have upside.
Sure. And that's a tough spot to be in, where you're gambling on a guy who has a career of not being healthy, which, guess what? We're going to talk about that with the Avs some too in a second here.
Ryan Johansson,
Yeah.
step on up.
But and you look at that and you just wonder where the St. Louis Blues are going to find success, because it's not just, hey, they're kind of overpaying their middle six. It's, hey, they're kind of overpaying everybody. Not really a recipe for success.
But it's a good thing Bennington's great under pressure, at least.
Well, he's great at something. Okay. Last up, we have the Avs roster, which, look, the Logan O'Connor spot is a little bit of a placeholder here. That's kind of the 6 forward spot on that third line that may well end up getting filled this offseason by a PTO or by Kovalenko down the line, if that's what you want to slot in there. So understand there's a little bit of just filling the holes going on here, but for the most part, this is what you can expect it to look like. It's about middle of the road on money spending. The point total you see on the graphic is on the low side. And I think that's the reality of most of this conversation, is the Avs are looking at 4 guys that they've brought in this year to take steps forward in Colorado.
Yeah, even if Miles Wood does exactly what he did last season, it's like fair value. It's not a good or bad deal. It's fine. Logan O'Connor continues to be positive value, but then and we expect Ross Colton to take some kind of step forward. If that's 40 points, then it's right there where you want it in terms of fair value. But those 3 guys, Drouin, Johansson, and Nichushkin, those are all guys that you look at and you say games played with all of them, because Val Nichushkin was on his way to a monster of a season.
Yeah.
If he had stayed healthy. The only time Ryan Johansson was healthy the last couple of years, he had a 60-point year. And Jonathan Drouin's per game point production has been fine. At 825, it really won't be hard for him to be great value. By the end of the year, that could end up being one of the most cost-efficient contracts in the entire NHL. But the Avs are in that position of they need a bunch of guys to stay number one, stay healthy. After that, I mean, just continue to be who they are, to be honest. You're not even asking for major steps forward outside of Ross Colton. All the other guys, it's just stay healthy. If they continue to produce at the point per game clips, this will be one of the most cost efficient middle sixes in the league.
So let me ask you this, Megan. Which of these players is it most important to be successful in Colorado?
But I know you said to pick one.
You can pick 2.
But to me, it's
fine.
between Johansson and Colton. One of them needs to pan out, and in a big way.
Yeah.
And I feel like they can actually afford for Johansson to maybe be the one that doesn't pan out if Ross Colton is the one that exceeds expectation. And that's sort of where I'm at with it. Just in the term that they granted Colton, I think that there has to be a lot of belief
for sure. Yeah.
for him to be the one to exceed expectation. Miles Wood to meet it, and hopefully exceed it too, at least in some of the things we've talked about, like with discipline.
Sure.
If he can live up to those things, that's great. It's interesting too. Chat's bringing up that there are some interchangeable players that probably, and that's a fair point, because the conversation does change a lot if there's a Lehkonen there instead, or if there's a Rantanen at points in there, because this was true of the boost in production for JT Compher when met with the right opportunity. And that's why, in looking at the projected points, kind of is what that right column is, it's not really a great number for the Avs, because so many of these guys are coming in newly. And we know that there's an effect on players in Colorado, a boost in production that inevitably happens that you can count on for some of these players. And seeing Drouin come in at $825K with a close to 30-point season as it is great value that I think is only higher in Colorado because of the opportunity that he's going to get here. So to answer your question, though, specifically, I'm looking to Ross Colton to be the guy that needs to exceed expectations.
I think it's an interesting conversation. As you mentioned, chat kind of saying, hey, Rantanen probably should play on the second line. I agree. Mechanically, he's probably going to play with those guys, but I'm not calling a dude who has 105 points a second liner. I'm sorry. He's a first line caliber player.
A guy that a guy coming off a 55 goal season, and is going to be one of the 3 highest minutes getters in Colorado this year. You're not trying to confuse this. This is why I had this caveat before we even started of, you could move one of those guys around, but you're not looking at Mikko Rantanen as a freaking middle 6 player. And even if you did, he's cost efficient. He had 100 points, making $9 million. Easy math.
And great. If Jonathan Drouin is playing well enough to stick on the first line and he puts up a 50 to 60 point season, awesome. The A+ scenario, whichever one of them you want to call this middle 6 guy, you're winning either way.
Right, and the value is then distributed differently. Then you've got someone on the top line that's of tremendous value if it is Drouin, that's putting up 60 points for $825,000.
Yep.
It's so funny to talk about a guy like, hey, this guy could have 60 points this year and make $825K.
And it's small amount of money.
Yeah, right. Just your average Joe cash flow, $825K.
I can produce not 60 points in the NHL for that amount of money. I'm available.
I think that's actually been Pierre-Edouard Belmar's entire pitch every offseason.
I can't do that, but I can play.
Yeah. I'll be in the lineup. That was Nate Thompson's whole thing too. He was like, look, I'll be there. Just give me league minimum every year and trade me at the deadline. We're golden, baby.
It is an interesting spot because the mixing up goes even beyond Rantanen and Drouin specifically. We've seen Nichushkin play on the top line plenty and be effective at doing that. The Avs are more than happy to double shift McKinnon all over the place when they need to. There will be a lot of fluidity, not just to the Avs, but to all of these lineups. This is just generalizing middle sixes and looking at value of forward rosters. And the Avs have potential to get great value out of their middle six, but they need guys to take steps forward. You've emphasized Colton in that case. And I think we've been a little bit dismissive of Johansson because we all kind of see a world where, hey, this might be the guy that we have the least hope for there being another level on. But if he can stay healthy, if he can put up, not even take another step, but a 50-plus point season, all of a sudden you have that much more coming out of your middle six in Colorado. And that stuff starts to add up very, very quickly. It's just, you can't give them the credit for something they haven't done yet.
Can we try to rank them really quickly?
Sure.
And just see kind of where we feel they all stack up next to each other. We looked at the money, but let's try to we can keep point production and expectations and whatever, all the things that we've talked about in this show. We'll cut Vegas and Tampa Bay out of it since we talked about them already, but just in the Central Division, let's see what we've got.
So Chicago bottom for sure.
Or Nashville. I mean, Nashville, Chicago.
Sure.
I-
Chicago probably.
I think those two are the
but-
clear-cut worst.
Yeah,
what the
that's
order
fine.
of those two is, whatever. So yeah, Chicago at the bottom, then Nashville.
I'd probably St. Louis next. Maybe Minnesota. I don't know.
I might like Minnesota more than St. Louis.
St. Louis has the glitz and glamour of upside with a guy like Verana or I guess Kapanen. The Minnesota doesn't. There's no guy there that you're talking about having a breakout.
I guess I'm not really a believer in St. Louis's upside, but at least there's some there. The Wilds is very established as what it is, and possibly moving the wrong direction with age.
Yeah, reliant on Marco Rossi breaking in and being an impact guy to make that middle six better. So I would put Minnesota's there and then St. Louis, but that's just me.
Good with that? Or are you going to make an argument for Minnesota ahead?
I think they're getting more value.
Okay.
And I think that St. Louis actually is trending the wrong direction in age more so. I think they are more aged than Minnesota comparatively.
Kind of not wrong about that.
But you know what? I actually don't feel that strongly about it. And I've been raked over the coals by Minnesota fans too many times. So I'm fine with St. Louis ahead of them.
I do think it is a really good point to say it's a more cost efficient group for Minnesota, because that even includes Zuccarello at $6 million.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the most expensive guy there is Marcus Foligno, and so they are getting way better value out of that group than what St. Louis is.
At least dollar to dollar.
Yeah.
Because then defensively, I know we're only ranking the middle six, but then defensively, this allowed them to have a better defense in Minnesota than in St. Louis.
Yep.
She's talked me into it. St. Louis is next. St. Louis, and then Minnesota, and then I would go Arizona.
Yeah.
It's hard to rank Arizona on the same list, right? Because Arizona's is almost all upside.
Projection.
Where you're
yeah.
But it's good.
I agree. I'm more than comfortable with Arizona ahead of those four. I don't have a problem with it, but I think it's pretty squarely in this spot, and then you have the top three.
Well, and then I would go Winnipeg and then Colorado.
Yeah, I think I would give Colorado the edge as well over Winnipeg. And then I think Dallas is pretty clear-cut the top. Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, definitely. Just the Matt Duchene deal, for me, the Wyatt Johnston, his existence, really helps buoy any downfall by either one of Jamie Benn or Joe Pavelski. If they both have it, Dallas is in serious trouble. But I think those guys, I think they're pretty good. I think that Dallas has built a really, really good hockey team.
Yeah, it's arguably their top 9, 10, 11. I don't believe in Gurionov at all, but their top 9, 10, 11 forwards are their strongest part of their lineup. So it'll be interesting. I do think, depending on how the first couple months of the season go, we might not be that far away from talking about Colorado as just as good or better than Dallas's middle six if things go well. If things go poorly, we might be a lot closer to talking to them at the level of Minnesota. So
well, and we get to get excited about other areas the Avs have gotten it right.
It's true.
Hopefully, this is a season where Cale Makar can be leaned on a little less extremely as he was last year, and be the Cale Makar that we know and love, that we still loved last season. He just had to deal with some injuries and was demanded a lot.
Why have a middle six when you have a top six on D?
When you have a Cale Makar and a Devon Taves.
It's funny because we're ranking Dallas as like the clear-cut number one here, but if you look at Okay, well, who has the best top line? It's Colorado. Who
Oh,
has the
for
best
sure.
defense? It's Colorado. Who
Yeah.
has the best goaltending? We just all agreed. Georgiev and Ottinger were right on the same level this past season.
Yep.
So it's like, look, Dallas wins this one, but when you start to look at the rest of the roster,
That's why I'm willing to take that.
Yep. Exactly.
yeah, this is all good. We can give them the dub for today, but they also need, I mean, you have a 34-year-old Evgeny Dadonov, 32-year-old Matt Duchene,
Yep.
34-year-old Jamie Benn, and 39-year-old Joe Pavelski. Like, if they continue to defy aging curves, they will stay on the top of this list. If they don't, they are in for a hard crash.
Well, and you see 32 years old, okay, whatever, you're on the aging curve. You start getting up there 34, 35, and especially Joe Pavelski at 39, it stops being an aging curve and it starts being more an aging brick wall where you go from being a really good NHL player to not one at all.
Yeah. Definitely. And honestly, even a guy like Evgeny Dadonov, he is at 34 years old. He's been teetering on
Yep.
how effective is this guy really. So, yeah, injuries are key every year for everyone. Like, obviously, this is true. If Dallas has Colorado's injury luck from last season, Dallas is going to plummet.
Yeah.
They will not be in contention for the division. Like,
they could genuinely finish, maybe not worse than Chicago, but at the very bottom of the Central if they have Colorado's injury luck.
yeah, if they go through what the Avs did last season, there's a reason that what Dallas or what Colorado and Vegas did last year was extremely rare. It's virtually impossible to win your division with that kind of injury, with those types of injuries. So we'll see how it goes for this season. You have to plan for injury on some level, but I don't think you can just willy-nilly be like they're going to lose 400 man games again this year.
And if they do, I'll be very sad.
Well, it's like if you're trying to plan for that, you're not going to be able to build a very good team because you're not going to spend $2.5 million on Miles Wood. You're going to spend that money on 3 minimum contract guys because you're so worried about that baseline level.
That in a perfect world, those dudes never play. Like,
yeah, totally. And maybe the Avs tried to steal Dallas's injury luck by importing so many guys from the Stars.
From the Texas Stars.
Yeah, because what is it? 3 of them with Tanner Caro, Riley Tufte, and Frederick Olofsson.
Yeah.
What? I don't know.
Gotta teach them their daily routines to stay healthy.
Right. Like, all right, what happened in the trainer's room down there to make this such a such a thing?
Well, they hired a new head athletic trainer for Eagles, so I don't know.
There you go.
I don't want to reinforce the belief that had any bearing on it.
Definitely, your trainers can prevent random concussions from happening.
Right. No.
That's why Gabe Landeskog's knee has an issue. It was the Eagles trainer last year.
It was an Eagles trainer.
Wasn't Cale Makar's skate in a freak accident at all.
Against Dallas.
Yeah.
I don't like
Can't make it up.
If they take Dallas's depth, they won't have any.
Facts. Problem solved. Okay, longest show of the offseason, probably. I mean, other than the live ones for free agency and stuff, but
look, that's just how you do it on August 16th.
I guess. Come at us, other podcasts. Yeah. We out here. We are going to get out of here for the day, though, and we are brought to you by Breckenridge Brewery, the official beer of DNVR. You can get it on tap down here at the bar. I've heard it's a great cure for injuries in season. The trainers recommend it for sure. Breckenridge Brewery. Go get yours today at your local liquor store. Use the Breck Beer Locator online at breckbrew.com. Join us Friday if you're local. Come down to the bar 6 p.m. for our live show. We'd love to see you out here. That's all I got. Megan and I are back tomorrow. There you go. There's the Friday night thing that Megan and I will be at. We hope to see you there. We hope to see you in the chat tomorrow, and we'll talk to you later, I guess.